Hi, my name is Bridget O'Reilly and I am the gallery director at Jennifer Ford Art, and today I will be talking to two of our upcoming artists on exhibition, Madeline Wilson and her exhibition Machine History, and Adam Meyer and his exhibition A Study on Unreality. The exhibitions will be on view from April 14th to May 14th. Okay, so we'll first be talking to Madeline Wilson. Hi Madeline, how are you doing?
Bridget. Good to see you as always.
Good to see you. So I guess I'll just start off and ask you, could you give us a brief introduction about your background and why photography is your core medium?
Yeah, of course. So I've been taking photographs for as long as I can remember. As far as something I've been seriously doing as a career or as something has been my main interest, I would say midway through high school. Mm-hmm. And I've done painting, drawing, I've played instruments, but photography is the thing that's really stuck for me.
I actually knew Madeline all through school, so this exhibition is really important to me because I can finally support her as an artist.
You're making me blush, Bridget.
So you grew up in the Midwest, but you have lived in Los Angeles for the past 6 years. How has the West Coast changed your work?
Well, I feel like I know everybody says this when they move to a city, but things just move at a different pace. And I sometimes feel when I come back to Fort Wayne, like I've traveled back in time 4 years. So I feel like my work has evolved more quickly. Just photography being such a visual based medium, your environment totally impacts it. The quality of light is amazing in Los Angeles. The actual setting has a lot to offer. So I feel like I've been able to move more quickly in evolving my style than I would if I had not moved.
Awesome, cool. So have you noticed a cultural shift in the art scene in Fort Wayne since you've been gone?
Well, definitely. I mean, I think it helps that now, I'm a little bit older. I'm not a teenager who's being a brat. But I've noticed when I did live here, I felt like there was so little to do as far as the art scene or culturally. Like my friends and I would go to IHOP because it was the only thing that was open. Whereas now I come home and there are all these events, maybe even too many for me to be able to go to, which isn't something I could have dreamed about when I was 16 living here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So moving towards the exhibition, Machine History, prior to the show's opening, you kind of expressed you wanted to kind of convey your anxiety about being a photographer in the digital age. So how does this exhibition reflect that sort of uneasiness?
Yeah, so to just explain a little bit more what you brought up. So I work primarily in digital photography, and then my boyfriend, who I've been with for years and years, does game design, and we talk about a lot how these things that we're making you might not even be able to access the technology in 5, 10, 20 years. So I guess wondering what we're leaving behind, which is why I wanted to do this show and make physical prints that at least, you can still look at, whereas something like, a CD or earlier VHSs were no longer, it's becoming harder to access. I think it really came up when my friend burned me a CD and I realized I couldn't put it in my computer and there was no CD player in my house, and how quickly we're moving away from things.
Well, I have known you as a portrait photographer, but this show doesn't feature any people in the pictures.
Yeah, just birds and landscapes.
Yeah. So can you explain this transition?
Yeah, of course. So I've worked, this is my second sort of solo show. I've done a few group shows before, but I've worked a lot doing commercial photography. And I guess in order to do commercial photography and then do fine art and still enjoy it and have it be something I'm passionate about, I have to partition things and have for example having worked some in fashion or that book about Skid Row that I was taking portraits, to have my work be something and then to have my work for fine art be something else, so then I'm not stressed out.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually the images behind us are part of your Yosemite series, and I really haven't seen any pictures of Yosemite like this before. Can you tell me a little bit about what makes them different?
So yeah, I guess that the first thing that I can think of is I took them, they look kind of like they could be black and white film prints just by the paper quality, but they're actually taken with my infrared digital camera. which I guess I was frustrated for a while. I guess one bad thing about living in Southern California is, you take a picture that you think is amazing, and then you see that 50 other people have already used this location, maybe with professional models and a better setup than you have. So sort of like making your mark can be tough, and that's why I like infrared photography, is it has such a different feel and is, photographing a whole spectrum of light that you can't even see. So I feel like it adds a really sort of unique edge to the pieces. I'm impressed that they're unlike photos you've seen of Yosemite before, since it's such a wildly photographed region. But I guess that with my technique, they're taken with an infrared camera, which in combination with the type of paper I used, that metallic luster, gives them this sort of like ethereal feel that I guess would be hard to do otherwise.
That's what I was going for. Definitely. Yeah, I really like how you've used that technology, and what does infrared actually do?
So pretty much digital cameras have gotten to the point where they're good enough that you have to actually block out the non-visible spectrum of light, or else it'll affect, your exposure, your white balance, etc. So I had an old camera that I otherwise, I wasn't really using it, I couldn't really sell it, so I got it converted to shoot infrared light instead. And I feel like it just gives this like really interesting tone, especially in black and white pictures, that's hard to replicate otherwise.
Yeah. It really picks up a really unique kind of blue, I would say.
Yeah.
So speaking of your Yosemite series, for the opening, you've included a virtual reality piece that you collaborated with your boyfriend called Void, and it creates an environment from your Yosemite pieces. Recently, artist John Raffman said, because of the level of sensory overload we experience on a day-to-day basis, we need to have this fully arresting experience in virtual reality in order to get a total sense of vertigo from a work of art. How do you feel about this?
Well, I love that you brought up John Raffman. I've been to a few of his gallery openings in LA. One of my friends is kind of like one of the first people, his brother is one of the first people to ever sort of get into him and like invest in his work. So we talk about him a lot. And I think, well, it's kind of like just watching a movie on Netflix versus watching a movie in a movie theater. If you're watching a movie on Netflix on your laptop, you're like, oh, I'm not invested, I'm just gonna stop. Whereas if you're in the movie theater, you're gonna take in the entire thing. It probably, like with the sound and the image, it might have a fuller effect on you. So with these images sort of being the base of my VR piece, they're the skybox, like you can look at these and just sort of like walk away. It's not taking up your full field of vision, whereas VR, it is essentially it is your reality. I hate to say that, but it's true.
It's essentially your eyes, so
yeah,
absolutely. So moving a little bit in a different direction, can you tell me about your creative decision to include multiple shots within the composition of Full Stop?
Yeah, so I think there's a chef who I love in LA who says something along the lines of, when he makes a menu, that the piece isn't done until like everything that you could take out of it has been taken out of it. And I do tend to work very minimally, I think, in comparison to other photographers in terms of my post-processing and editing and use of artificial light. It's all very sort of natural light, minimal, like darkroom only techniques. So the multiple images, I guess, came from me feeling like the pieces needed a little bit more to be full. And then also a reference to my photo teacher who was very influential to me, Robert Flick, who was at USC, who that style of stacking I had kind of always done. And it turns out that it is something that he had used to sort of make a career for himself. So we bonded over that and ended up having a great sort of mentor relationship.
You're not going to compete at all?
No. I've sent him pictures of those actually, being like, hey, here's what I'm showing, and I have his blessing.
Yeah,
so
that's nice. No, that sort of mutual inspiration is nice. So on that same topic, who inspires you?
I mean, that's tough, because I feel like one thing that I think was actually really good for my career is, it's not like the high school I went to had a really stringent art history program or anything. So I kind of came in developing my style not really knowing about a lot of photographers and a lot of artists, which I think can be good, because I feel like really early on you can get too influenced and say like, this person made this picture, I only want to make this picture. But I would say now, as far as contemporary photographers, Wolfgang Tillmans is a big inspiration, as you can see by my lack of frames and everything being different dimensions on the wall. And he's probably the biggest for me.
Yeah. So why do you choose to manipulate your images in the way that you do?
Well, too, like I would like to think, at least for people who know me, they can see something like the mirroring over on that wall, or sort of how these are presented, that it just seems like me. And like it ties into what I was saying before, is like I feel like it's not really finished until I do something along those lines.
Yeah. So last question, any advice to young artists in Fort Wayne that want to pursue creative endeavors?
I mean, I would just say, just practice, keep practicing, even if you feel like you're not feeling creative or like what you're doing isn't perfect, you just need to keep producing work. And even if you're not in an environment that's really, nurturing that, just to push through and keep making something, and it'll all work itself out eventually, I'm sure.
And that's a great advice for anyone. So
yeah, for anything.
Well, yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bridget.
You're welcome. I'm joined here by Adam Meyer and his exhibition, I Study in Unreality. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Bridget.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing well. So first off, could you just give us a brief introduction about your background and your interest in exploring mediums of art production and representation that have to do with the digital age?
Yeah, I've been a graphic designer for a while, and it's been my career, and it's kind of been the medium for my art for a while. And yeah, so the digital medium is just sort of the new and the future of art. So I like to combine my career with the art itself.
Basically, the show kind of reflects your interest in juxtaposing digital and analog.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure, so a lot of the pieces incorporate processes with both digital and analog. With the analog, I like to work with printers and physically sort of distressing the pieces, and then I like to scan them in and work in a digital process, so color correcting or adjusting colors and sort of adding additional layers and textures in Photoshop.
I think a great example of that is the piece behind us. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so this was a print that I had printed out on a Xerox machine, and I made some cuts and shreds in the paper, as you can tell, and I brought it into the scanner. I incorporated some movement while it was scanning, and yeah, I adjusted some of the colors and printed it on a large format digital printer.
Really, that's awesome. I kind of like, what I like most about your work is that although it's processed and reprocessed, ultimately it kind of achieves this sort of organic feel. Like this could even be like a mountainscape.
Yeah.
So I think that have your explorations in digital environments and context change your perception of physical nature, like in reality? It's kind of a weird question, but.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're talking about how the process is kind of limited because of.
Kind of more like, since you see the world in a different way, as seen through your art, has it kind of changed your perspective of what is like in reality? Because your artwork is kind of the unreality.
Yeah, I mean, like with this, it started off as a photograph, sort of unedited, and then bringing it into the computer and adding those digital effects, it does sort of cross that line of real and unreal, and so that's what this show is about, is kind of discovering that area between digital and analog, real and unreal.
And not only are you a visual artist, but you're also a musician, and I've included a sound and video installation in your exhibition. Can you tell me about it?
Sort of the same concept. With the audio pieces, I'm using a lot of field recordings and bringing those in again to the computer and adding sort of synthesized sounds and instruments and kind of weaving in between both sets of sounds and sort of composing with those different sets of sounds. And the idea and the goal is sort of I guess sort of confuse the listener, so they're not really sure where that sound, where the source was from, or what's producing that sound.
It ties so well into your work because you see a gradient like behind me, and you don't know how you created that work really, and you've actually just done a lot of reprocessing and achieved something that is similar to painting, which is nice. So you're also an abstract painter. How does this influence your artwork?
I think it's kind of all the same process. With the painting and the digital work, I like to sort of let the viewer decide and be as distant from what the meaning or the interpretation is, and just sort of use the textures and the layers and the colors to create an emotion, and then that emotion is really just, it's abstract. I'm letting the viewer decide.
So you also own a record label and designed the album artwork for that, some of which is in the show. Do you think that your job relates to your art practice in a significant way?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. It's creating pieces that I try and sort of stay distant from it, but still create it. So really the goal is to let the viewer decide, the emotion that they feel or what they see, or even decide how it was created.
That's awesome. So are there any issues around the production of or the display and exhibition of new media art that you're concerned about?
So with the process of taking it from analog to digital, and then again back to analog to get the prints produced, there's limitation between getting it from the digital format to the prints. You're limited to the actual printer that's being used, and the color spectrum, and the quality of the print. You just can't mimic a screen. And so that definitely, there's definitely some limitations, but it's also a part of the work. So, you have to move things around to work around that.
Yeah, definitely a challenging medium, I would say. Well then lastly, what advice would you give aspiring graphic designers like yourself that want to do commercial and fine art and strike that balance?
Well, I think with commercial art, I think with our society is sort of understanding advertising more and more, and so you really have to, I think, again, sort of step away and don't be so literal or so, don't try and force that image to create that emotion. The viewer understands what's going on, and they understand it's an advertisement or with commercial art. So just try and create it like you would an art piece, and let the viewer have more freedom.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Ford with Jennifer Ford Art, and I'm here with our gallery director, Bridget O'Reilly. And we're going to talk today a little bit about the process of curation and also installation. So, Bridget, tell me about how you came to know these artists and why you chose to have them together.
Absolutely. So I moved back to Fort Wayne a little over a year ago, and I went to Wunderkammer Company, which is a nonprofit art gallery on more towards downtown, and Adam Meyer had an exhibition with Michael von Green, and I just really loved his work, and I told him, I think you're doing things that not a lot of people in Fort Wayne are doing, and I'm really drawn to people and artists that are working in mediums that are just outside of the norm. So I knew I wanted to work with him in some way. And then I've known Madeline Wilson for most of my entire life. We went to school together, so I've known her photography from the start. And she's been working more recently with photography that kind of strikes the balance between digital and non-digital photography. And Adam kind of does that the same way, except just with mixed media. So I thought they would really thematically fit perfectly together.
And I know that digital media is one of your passions and something that you really gravitate towards. Does it have anything to do with you being really a specialist in the social media and marketing background, or was that something that you were kind of following even before your jobs in social media?
I would say that I grew up online. I remember our first computer. I spent so much of my time playing games and having a blog, and I just felt here in Indiana, I think you don't get exposure to a lot of important and big things happening in the world, and that's fine because we have the internet. And so that's how I learned about art and fashion and came to know my passion for everything. So I think that me loving art the way I do and loving, the world that we live in, I think that it makes sense that I would be drawn to that art the most.
So I know that hanging the show is just one very, very small part of what it takes to get a show ready for a big opening on Thursday nights. What are some of the other things that go into making a show really special?
I would say just making sure the artists feel appreciated and working with them to do programming that they want to do. I know Adam and I are putting together a night where he can perform his music, which it's great to see. Our first artist, Frank Lewis Allen, we had a lot of great programming around autism, and it was such a good way to inspire those who feel like they can't create because they have autism. So I think that that's a huge thing, is working with the artists, making sure they feel supported. And then of course there's all the little nitty-gritty things like labels and paperwork, which is not so fun, but it's just a lot of time and effort dedicated to making the artists feel like they're appreciated.
So for this show, one of our artists is working in LA. Were there any special concerns that came up with kind of coordinating everything from such a far distance?
Yeah, it wasn't the easiest, but I don't think it was hard either, because the world we live in, I could send her screenshots of things I liked, and in an instant she would receive them. And I think that's really ties into the show a little bit, is this world we're living in where we're constantly connected. So I didn't really feel like it was problematic, but that's also because I've known Madeline for so long, so I just know her work and I'm familiar with how she prefers things. So yeah, I would say if you're working long distance with an artist, I'd probably suggest that you know them pretty well, or to a certain extent, or you have done a lot of research about who they are.
Thank you so much for doing all of this and getting it coordinated and involved. Who would be your favorite audience to come and see this work? Obviously, we're open for everybody. We're open to the public. There's so many people who are interested in this type of work and this topic. But who do you see as really kind of the key people who will really be drawn to this exhibition?
I think that since Madeline and Adam both went to school for kind of arts-related things, that it would be really great for students to experience what's happening in the realm of graphic design or photography, and how that can be translated into a fine art gallery show. I think that students often are taught, very linearly, like in a linear pattern, and that's existed for years and years and years, and that they really need exposure to new things happening in the art world. So I think students would be really cool, or people who are interested in virtual reality, which is a growing audience. That would be ideal.
Perfect. Well, I am so excited to share this exhibition with the public, and we welcome everyone to come out. So you've done an amazing job. Thank you.
I've done amazing. Thank you.
Great.